My name is Mia, and I didn't expect my life to change at a birthday dinner. It was supposed to be simple,
Warm.
predictable, the kind of evening I had organized hundreds of times before, quietly supporting everyone else from the background. Instead, it became the moment I finally saw the truth. The glasses chimed softly as my daughter lifted hers. The light from the chandelier reflected in the crystal, scattering little sparks across the dining room walls. Everyone fell silent, just as they always did when she spoke. She had that kind of presence, confident, polished, admired.
I smiled her, genuinely proud.
I always was. I want to make a toast, she said, her voice smooth, practiced. Of course you do, I thought. You've always known how to take a room. She turned slightly toward me. To my mom, she said. The woman who raised me. A few guests nodded politely. Someone murmured something kind. My heart warmed just a little. And then she continued. And who probably should start thinking about a care home soon. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The heavy, suffocating kind that presses against your chest. For a second, I thought I misheard. I didn't. A few awkward laughs escaped from the table, uncertain, forced. Someone coughed. My fingers tightened around my glass, but I didn't move. I couldn't. She's still doing great, of course, my daughter added lightly, waving her hand as if brushing off the tension she had just created. But we all know it's better to plan ahead, right? Plan ahead. For what? For being erased? I felt something shift inside me, but I pushed it down. Like always. I'm only 70, I said quietly. It barely sounded like my voice. She smiled at me, but there was something off about it. Too sharp, too distant. Exactly, she replied. That's why now is the perfect time.
Perfect.
The word echoed in my mind as the conversation awkwardly moved on. Someone raised a new toast, someone else changed the subject, and the dinner resumed. But I was no longer there. Not really. I had built my entire life around her. After her father died, I worked double shifts. I sold jewelry I loved. I skipped vacations, postponed dreams, ignored my own exhaustion, just to make sure she never felt the absence he left behind. And I never regretted it. Not once. Until that moment. After dinner, I stood in the kitchen, rinsing plates I wasn't supposed to touch. Mom, you don't have to do that, she called from behind me. I nodded, but I didn't stop. Because if I stopped, I might think. And if I thought, I might feel. And if I felt, I wasn't sure I could hold it together.
That's when I saw it.
A folder, half open on the counter. Inside, brochures.
Soft beige covers, smiling elderly couples, bright gardens.
Silver Pines Living Community. My chest tightened. So it wasn't a joke. It was already planned. Later, as I was putting on my coat, my grandson approached me quietly. Grandma, he whispered, glancing over his shoulder, I'm sorry. I crouched slightly to meet his eyes. It's okay, I said gently. But he shook his head. No, it's not. There was something in his expression. Hesitation, guilt. What is it? I asked. He swallowed. They talk about your house a lot, he said. Mom and Dad. My heart skipped. What about it? He hesitated again, then said it anyway. They want to sell it after you move out. Move out. Not if. After. And they already talked to someone about it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That house wasn't just property. It was my life. Every wall held a memory. Every room carried a story. It was the last place where I still felt like myself. And they had already decided its future. Without me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by silence that felt louder than any argument. Papers lay in front of me. Mortgage documents. My name. Only mine. I had kept it that way years ago, thinking it would be simpler. Safer. I almost laughed at that. Safer. By morning, something inside me had changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But permanently. I got dressed carefully. The same way I used to when I needed to be strong. The way I had on my daughter's wedding day.
Composed.
Controlled.
Certain.
At the bank, the manager looked surprised. This is a significant decision, he said cautiously. I know, I replied. And for the first time in a long time. I truly meant it. I want to lock everything. I continued. No changes.
No financing.
No transfers without my direct approval. He studied me for a moment. Are you sure? I met his eyes. Yes.
And I signed.
Walking out of that building, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not sadness. Something quieter, stronger.
Control.
I didn't know yet what I would do next. I didn't know how far this would go. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time in years, I had chosen myself. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, but not because I had slept well. It was the opposite. My mind had been working all night, replaying every word, every glance, every small detail I had ignored for years. It was strange how clearly things started to make sense once you stopped trying to protect the illusion. I made coffee and stood by the window, staring at the quiet street outside my house. My house. The thought felt different now, heavier, more real. Not just a place I lived in, but something I had built, protected, sacrificed for. And yet, somewhere along the way, I had allowed it to become something others felt entitled to. I didn't have to wait long before reality caught up with me. Around mid-morning, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I didn't need to look to know who it was. There was a certain urgency in the way the engine stopped, in the way the car door shut too hard. A few seconds later, the front door opened without knocking. Mia, my daughter called out, her voice already tense. I stayed where I was. In the kitchen. I replied calmly. She walked in quickly, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, her expression tight with frustration.
She didn't sit down.
She didn't smile. She didn't even pretend. I've been calling you, she said. I know, I answered, taking a slow sip of coffee. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Then why didn't you answer? Because I didn't feel like talking. That caught her off guard. Just for a second. I saw it. Then her posture stiffened again. Mom, what's going on? She asked, crossing her arms. Why did the bank call us this morning? So that's how she found out. I set my cup down carefully. I made some changes, I said. What kind of changes? The kind that protect what belongs to me. Her jaw tightened. You froze the mortgage, she said flatly. Yes. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. You had no right to do that without talking to us, she snapped. I almost smiled. No right? I repeated softly. It's in my name. That's not the point, and you know it, she shot back. We had plans. Yes, I said. I've started to realize that. Her eyes flashed. What is that supposed to mean? It means, I said slowly, choosing each word carefully, that you were making decisions about my life without including me. She let out a sharp breath, clearly trying to control her temper. That's not fair, she said. We were trying to help you. By preparing a nursing home brochure? I asked. She rolled her eyes immediately. Oh my God, you're still stuck on that? It was a suggestion. It didn't sound like a suggestion. It was a joke. It didn't feel like one. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she changed tactics. You're overreacting, she said, her tone calmer now, almost persuasive. We're just trying to think ahead. That house is too big for you. It's not practical. There it was again. Practical. As if my life could be reduced to efficiency. I've lived here for decades, I replied. It's only impractical now because it doesn't fit your plans. Her expression hardened. That's not true. Then what is true? I asked. Because from what I've heard, you're already planning what happens after I move out. Her reaction was immediate. Who told you that? I didn't answer. That kid doesn't understand anything, she continued quickly. He hears things and twists them. I held her gaze. He understood enough. She looked away for a moment, then back at me, irritation replacing whatever guilt might have been there.
Fine, she said.
Yes, we talked about options. But that's normal. Families do that. Families talk to each other, I replied. Her patience snapped. You make it impossible to talk to you, she said. You question everything. You worry about everything. It's exhausting. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were new, but because this time, I didn't ignore them. I ask questions because it's my life, I said quietly. And we're trying to be part of it, she shot back. No, I said, shaking my head slightly. You're trying to manage it. That stopped her. For a second, she didn't know what to say. Then she laughed, but there was no humor in it. Unbelievable, she muttered. After everything we've done for you, I felt something shift again, deeper this time. What exactly have you done for me? I asked. She stared at me. What? I'm asking, I said calmly. What have you done for me? She hesitated. We include you, she said finally. We make sure you're not alone. By asking me to babysit whenever you need? I asked. That's not fair. Isn't it? Her frustration turned into anger again. You always twist things, she said. You always make yourself the victim.
No, irraplia.
I just stopped ignoring the truth. The room fell silent again. Then her voice dropped, colder now. You're being selfish. The word hung in the air. Selfish. I repeated it in my mind, testing it, examining it. For years, I had done everything for her. Everything. And now for setting one boundary. I was selfish. Maybe, I said finally. She blinked. What? Maybe I am, I repeated. But if protecting myself makes me selfish, then I can live with that. She stared at me as if she didn't recognize me. And in a way, she didn't. Because I wasn't the same person anymore. She grabbed her bag suddenly. I can't deal with this right now, she said. You're not thinking clearly.
No, irraplia sufli.
For the first time, I am. She paused at the doorway. This isn't over, she said. I know, I answered. And I meant that too. After she left, the house felt different. Not empty, not lonely, just quiet, peaceful, in a way I hadn't felt in years. I walked slowly through each room, noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. The light coming through the windows, the worn edges of the furniture, the photographs on the walls. There was a whole life here. My life. And I had almost let it slip away without even realizing it. That afternoon, I made a decision. Not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of clarity. I went to my desk, picked up my phone, and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. When she answered, her voice was warm, familiar. Mia, she said, surprised. Is that really you? I smiled faintly. Yes, I said. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was coming back to myself. I think, I added slowly, I need a change. There was a pause. Then she said, gently, then come. And just like that, a new chapter of my life quietly began. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my daughter, not my neighbors, not even myself out loud. The decision settled inside me quietly, like something that had been waiting for years and finally found the right moment to surface. Leaving wasn't an escape, it was a return. A return to a version of me I had forgotten existed. The next few days moved with an unusual clarity. I wasn't rushing, but I wasn't hesitating either. I started sorting through the house, not in a dramatic, emotional way, but calmly, deliberately. Drawers, cabinets, old boxes in the attic. Things I had kept out of habit, rather than meaning. Objects that once felt important now seemed like placeholders for time that had already passed. What surprised me most wasn't how hard it was to let go. It was how easy. There were moments, of course, of photographs slipping out from between old papers. A small drawing my daughter made when she was 5, stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. I sat with that one for a while. Not crying, not smiling, just remembering. Back when love was simple. Back when I didn't have to question it. I placed it gently into a separate box. Some things you don't throw away. Not because they still define your present, but because they remind you who you once were. 2 days later, I got a call. Mia, we need to talk. Her voice was sharp, controlled, the kind she used when she was trying not to lose her temper. I'm listening, I said. I heard from the bank again, she continued. They said there's absolutely no way to move forward without your approval. That's correct. You're seriously going through with this? Yes. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. Softer. Strategic. Mom, why are you doing this? She asked. We're on the same side. I looked around my living room as she spoke. The same walls, the same furniture, the same life. But it didn't feel the same anymore. I don't think we are, I said. She exhaled sharply. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, irraplia. I've just been ignoring it for too long. Another pause. Then she said something that almost made me laugh. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you're just overwhelmed. There it was. The quiet suggestion. The beginning of doubt. Of incompetence. Of age. For years, I would have questioned myself right then. I would have softened, apologized, tried to make peace. But not this time. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I said calmly. Her voice hardened again. So what now? You just shut us out. I'm setting boundaries. That's not how family works. I let that sit for a moment. No, I said finally. That's exactly how healthy family works. She didn't respond immediately. And for the first time, I sensed something new on her end. Not anger, not control, uncertainty. That same evening, I booked my ticket. I didn't overthink it. I didn't compare dates or look for the perfect time. There would never be a perfect time. There would only be a moment when you either moved forward or stayed exactly where you were. And I was done staying. The drive felt longer than it actually was. Not because of distance, but because of everything I was leaving behind and everything I was walking toward without fully knowing what it would look like. I stopped more than usual. Small places. Quietines. Overlooks where the horizon stretched further than my thoughts could follow. I sat longer, breathed deeper, noticed things I had ignored for years. When did I stop seeing the world like this? Somewhere between responsibility and routine. Somewhere between being needed and being used. When I finally arrived, the air felt different. Cleaner. Sharper. Alive. The house stood where it always had, untouched by time in the way only certain places managed to be. It wasn't perfect. The paint had faded slightly, the wood had aged, but it felt real. Honest. Unlike the life I had just left behind. Before I could even get out of the car, I saw her walking toward me. She hadn't changed much. Maybe a little older, a little slower, but the same warmth, the same presence. Mia, she said, smiling like no time had passed at all. I stepped out of the car. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's mother. Someone's support system. Someone's responsibility. I felt like myself. That night, we talked for hours. Not about drama. Not about conflict, but about life, about who we had been, and who we had become. At some point, she looked at me carefully and asked, So, what really made you leave? I could have given her the simple version, the polite version, but I didn't. I realized I was slowly disappearing, I said. She didn't interrupt. I gave so much of myself away, I continued, that I forgot what was left. She nodded, not surprised. You always did that, she said gently. Even when we were young. I smiled faintly. I thought that's what love was. And now, I looked out toward the dark horizon. Now I think love without respect becomes something else. The next morning, I woke up without pressure. No expectations. No obligations waiting for me. Just silence. And possibility. It felt unfamiliar at first, almost uncomfortable, But then, peaceful. Days passed differently there.
Slower.
More intentional. I found myself doing simple things with unexpected satisfaction. Walking,
Cooking.
sitting outside without checking the time, thinking without interruption. And slowly, something inside me began to return. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, like a part of me that had been waiting patiently to be noticed again. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. I stared at the screen for a moment. Her name. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mom, she said.
Her voice was different this time.
Less sharp, less certain. Where are you? She asked. I told you, I replied. I left for a while. You actually left? She said, as if the idea still didn't fully register. Yes. There was a long silence. Then, that's extreme. I almost smiled. No, I said. It's necessary. She didn't argue right away. And that told me more than anything she could have said. You're really not coming back soon, are you? She asked quietly. I thought about that. About the house. About the life I had built around her. About the version of myself that had stayed too long.
No, I said.
Another silence. Heavier this time. I don't understand you anymore, she said. I took a slow breath. That's okay, I replied. I'm just starting to understand myself. When the call ended, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel doubt. I felt something new. Something solid. Freedom. That evening, as the sun set slowly across the horizon, I sat outside and allowed myself to fully accept it. I hadn't just left a place. I had left a role. A version of myself that no longer belonged to me. And for the first time, I wasn't looking back. Time began to move differently after I left. Not slower in the way people romanticize, but deeper. Each day felt fuller, even when I did very little. It was as if I had spent years living on the surface of my own life, and only now was I finally sinking into it, feeling its weight, its texture, its meaning. At first, the quiet felt unfamiliar. I kept expecting interruptions, a call, a request, a responsibility waiting just around the corner. But nothing came.
No one needed anything from me.
No one expected me to fix, solve, organize, or sacrifice. And strangely, that was the hardest part to accept. For so long, I had measured my worth by how useful I was to others. Without that constant demand, I felt exposed, almost uncertain of what to do with myself. But instead of running back to the familiar, I stayed. I let the discomfort settle, let the silence stretch, let the absence of pressure become something I could breathe inside. Little by little, I started building a routine, but not the kind I used to have, dictated by other people's needs. This one was mine. I woke up when I felt rested, not when I was needed. I drank my coffee slowly, without checking the time. I walked along the shore, letting the wind move through me instead of rushing past it. I noticed things. The sound of water shifting against the rocks. The way the light changed throughout the day. The feeling of being present in my own body instead of constantly thinking about where I had to be next. It felt unfamiliar. And then, gradually, it felt right. One afternoon, I found myself going through old boxes stored in a small room I hadn't opened since I arrived. It wasn't intentional at first. I was just looking for something practical, but instead, I found pieces of a life I had almost forgotten. Photographs, letters, notes written in handwriting I barely recognized as my own. There was one photo that made me pause longer than the rest. I was younger in it, much younger, standing confidently, smiling in a way that felt open, unguarded. There was a light in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. I sat down with that photo in my hands. Who was she? The answer came quietly.
Me.
Before everything became about responsibility. Before I learned to put myself last without even questioning it. Before I convinced myself that giving everything away was the same as being loved. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger, feeling something shift inside me again. Not sadness. Not regret. Recognition. That evening, I had a conversation that stayed with me longer than I expected. We were sitting outside, watching the sky slowly darken, when she looked at me and said, "You're different." I smiled slightly. "I feel different." She nodded. "No, not just that. You're a lighter." The word surprised me. Lighter. "I think I stopped carrying things that were never mine to begin with," I said. She studied me for a moment, then asked, "Do you miss it?" I knew what she meant. The old life. The constant involvement. The feeling of being needed. I thought about it carefully before answering. "I miss parts of it," I said honestly. "But I don't miss who I became inside it." She nodded slowly, as if that made perfect sense. "Most people never get to that point," she said. "They stay where it's familiar, even if it's hurting them." I almost did, I admitted. A few days later, my phone buzzed again.
I didn't rush to answer this time.
That was new. When I finally picked it up, I saw my daughter's name. For a moment, I just looked at it. Not with fear. Not with obligation. Just awareness. Then I answered.
"Hi," I said.
There was a pause on the other end. "Hi," she replied. Her voice was different again. Less sharp. Less defensive. But still uncertain. "How are you?" she asked. The question sounded simple. But it wasn't. Because for the first time in a long time, I had an honest answer. "I'm good," I said. There was a silence that followed. Not uncomfortable. Just unexpected. "I didn't think you'd actually say that," she admitted. I smiled faintly. I didn't either. We talked for a while, but it wasn't like our usual conversations. There were no accusations. No tension building under every sentence. It wasn't perfect, but it was calmer. At one point, she said something that caught me off guard. "I've been thinking about what you said." "About what?" "About boundaries." I waited. "I don't think I understood what that meant before," she admitted. I thought family just worked around each other." "Sometimes they do," I said. "But that only works when everyone respects each other." Another pause. "I'm starting to see that," she said quietly. I didn't rush to respond. Growth doesn't happen loudly. It happens in moments like that. After the call ended, I sat for a while, letting it settle. Nothing had been fixed. Nothing had been fully resolved. But something had shifted. Not just in her. In me. Because I no longer felt the need to rush back, to repair everything immediately, to sacrifice my space just to restore comfort. I could let things develop. Naturally. Slowly. Healthily. That night, I realized something important. I hadn't come here just to escape a situation. I had come here to rebuild myself. And I was doing it.
Piece by piece.
Choice by choice. Weeks passed, and with each one, I felt more grounded, more certain, more present. I started doing things I hadn't done in years, not because I didn't have time before, but because I had stopped believing they mattered. I read. I wrote. I spent hours thinking, not worrying, not planning, just thinking. And the more I did, the more I understood something I had missed for most of my life. Being needed is not the same as being valued. And giving everything is not the same as being loved. One evening, as I sat watching the horizon, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What do I actually want? Not what others expect. Not what feels safe. Not what I've always done. What do I want? The answer didn't come immediately. But for the first time, I was willing to wait for it. Because now I had something I didn't have before.
Time. Space.
And the courage to finally live a life that belonged to me. A year changes more than time. It changes perspective. When I look back now, it's hard to believe how close I was to losing myself completely. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, piece by piece, until there would have been almost nothing left that was truly mine. And the strangest part? I wouldn't have even noticed. That's what scares me the most now, not what almost happened, but how normal it felt while it was happening. By the time a full year had passed, my life no longer felt like something I had stepped into temporarily. It felt like mine again. Fully, completely, without hesitation. The house had changed, but not in a way that erased its past. It had simply grown with me. I had rearranged rooms, repainted walls, open spaces that had once been closed, not just physically, but emotionally. It reflected who I was now, not who I used to be. I started noticing how I moved through my days. There was no rush, no constant pressure, no underlying sense that I was forgetting something important or letting someone down. I woke up with intention instead of obligation, and that made all the difference. I had also started building something new, something I never expected at this stage in my life. At first, it began almost accidentally. I had always had an eye for space, for details, for how things could feel different with just a few changes. What started as small adjustments in my own home turned into helping others. A neighbor asked for advice, then another. Then someone recommended me to a friend. Before I realized it, I wasn't just helping. I was creating, designing, building something that came entirely from me. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about recognition. It was about expression. And for the first time in decades, I felt proud of something that had nothing to do with sacrifice. But the biggest change wasn't in my home, or my routine, or even my work. It was in my relationships, especially with her. When my daughter arrived that summer, I didn't know what to expect. We had spoken. We had tried. There had been effort, but effort doesn't always mean resolution. I stood outside when the car pulled up, watching as the doors opened one by one. My grandchildren ran toward me first, full of energy, unaffected by the complexity of everything that existed between the adults. I embraced them, grounding myself in something simple, something honest. Then I looked up. She was standing there. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward me.
Hi, she said. Y raplia. No tensión.
No performance. Just two people standing in a moment that didn't need to be forced into anything more than it was. The days that followed weren't perfect, but they were real, and that mattered more. We didn't pretend nothing had happened. We didn't avoid the past, but we also didn't let it control every interaction. There were conversations, some difficult, some surprisingly calm. One evening, after dinner, we found ourselves alone in the kitchen. She was quieter than usual, focused on something that clearly hadn't been easy for her to say. "I've been thinking a lot," she finally said. I didn't interrupt. "I didn't realize how much I was taking for granted," she continued. "Not just what you did, but who you were." Her voice didn't break, but it softened. I thought everything would always stay the same," she admitted. I nodded slowly. "That's the thing about people," I said. "They don't stay the same." She looked at me, really looked this time, not as someone she relied on, not as someone she expected something from, but as a person. "I see that now," she said quietly. "We didn't fix everything in that conversation.
And we didn't need to.
Because for the first time, it wasn't about fixing. It was about understanding." The children spent their days exploring, laughing, filling the house with a kind of life I hadn't felt in years. But this time it was different. I wasn't responsible for everything. I wasn't the one holding everything together. I was simply there, present, and that made every moment feel lighter. One morning, she joined me outside as I watched the sunrise. We stood in silence for a while, side by side, not needing to fill the space with words. Then she said something unexpected. "I used to think you were always supposed to be there for me," she said. "No matter what." I turned slightly toward her. "And now?" I asked. "Now I think I was supposed to learn how to stand on my own too." I didn't respond immediately, because that was the moment, the shift, the understanding that had taken so long to reach. "I'll always be your mother," I said finally, "but that doesn't mean I stop being myself." She nodded. "I know." And for the first time, I believed her. Later that day, as the house filled with voices again, with movement and laughter and the simple noise of life, I stepped outside for a moment. Not to escape,
But to pause. To take it in.
to recognize how far I had come. I thought about that dinner, that toast, the moment everything changed. At the time, it felt like something was taken from me, but now I understood.
It had given me something: clarity, strength.
The courage to finally choose myself. I wasn't the same woman anymore. I wasn't someone who would quietly accept being pushed aside for the convenience of others. I wasn't someone who confused sacrifice with love. And I wasn't someone who needed permission to live her own life. I was Mia. Not just a mother. Not just a role. Not just a part of someone else's story.
But the author of my own.
And as I stood there, watching the light spread slowly across the horizon, I realized something simple, but powerful. It wasn't about starting over. It was about finally beginning.